What is up guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be having a look at creating custom menus in Diablo 2 Resurrected. So imagine that you just created a new mod. Now you have new enemies, new items, new rune words, new cube recipes. So how do you let people know what's in your mod? Well, you probably have some details on the download page, say on Nexus Mods. You might have a wiki or a readme file. But all of those require the player to exit the game to look something up. So again, taking something like new cube recipes into account, if a player wants to use them and they have to alt-tab out of the game, find the link to your wiki and then look up what they actually want to make, then that isn't a very good user experience. So what happens if we add a new menu into, say, the pause menu of the game, where players can actually look up all the cube recipes and rune words that are in your mod? Well, that would be fantastic. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. And many thanks to Colin from D2R Reimagined who gave me the idea for this video. Do check out his mod and I'll link it down in the description below. So what will the end result actually look like today? Well, we're in game now, so let's pause and see what happens. Oh, what's that? Subscribe to my channel? Alright, aside from that, you can see we have two new entries here. So we've Runeword info and cube recipes. So both of these are two new menus that we added. And if we click into them, we can see this is a tabbed menu for our rune words. So we have common rune words and all rune words. And then we just have a table in each of these. And we also have a custom background here as well. And then we have close buttons so we can exit out of this menu. And then for cube recipes, it's pretty much the same thing. So there's nothing too complex here, we're just adding two new menus to the game and filling in a bit of detail in those menus. So here we are in our mod directory, we have our menu.mpq, we have our mod info, etc. And we're concerned mainly with the data global UI layouts directory. And here we have a bunch of different files. Now the primary entry point to this is this pause layout hd.json. Now if we actually look in the cask view and we go into the data global UI layouts directory, we can see we have tons of different files here. And all the files have things like save indicator panel and save indicator panel HD. Now we're only concerned with the HD files because we only care about the new graphics. We don't care about the legacy graphics mode. But all the files in here are a great source of information on different things you can achieve in the menus in-game. So do check out these JSON files when you're creating your own custom menus. But for the time being, we'll open this pause layout hd.json with Visual Studio Code. And here we go. So we have our pause panel here, and you can see we have a type and a name for everything. And both of these fields are important. So the type is generally something like a widget or a different type of panel, and you can see these different types in all those other menu files. But this pause layout is the pause menu that shows up when you hit escape, so we'll have a look at the different fields in it. And this is all hierarchical, so we have our pause panel, and then that will have a bunch of children, and those children can have other children, etc, etc. So it's really a nested structure all the way down. So you can see here we have a pause panel, it has a default widget of return to game which is used down below somewhere. We then have a bunch of children, so we have things like a rectangle widget, and it looks like this rectangle widget is just a semi-opaque overlay on the pause menu, so that would be where it kind of dims the background when you pause the game, because you can see the alpha value here is 0.5. Then we have like a click catcher widget here, we have some other widgets. Honestly, a lot of these aren't very important, but you can experiment around with them later on. So what's important here are some of the other widgets. So for example, the text box widget, which again tells you to subscribe, and then the table widgets. Now the table widgets are very interesting because you can have different rows in the table, and we utilize this a lot in this mod. So you can see this one's called the pause table, and then it has more children for each of the rows in the table. So the first one is the options, then we have the Runeword info, which is our new one, and our cube recipes, which is also new. So these two entries are what we added to the table. And now looking at them, they're just a new row in the table, and then in that row a button. And we have a name for both the button and the row. So we have a file name for the actual image that's used for this button. So if we check in cast view, this actually comes from the data HD global UI directory. So that's the root directory used. And we can see it's pause menu / pause button. And we can see here pause menu and pause button.sprite and pause button.lowend.sprite. So if we wanted to create a different button, we could edit one of these, rename it, and then reference it in this file name here. And we'll do that later on with one of the backgrounds that I showed you already. So we have some more fields. What's important here is the text string, and you can see I have an @ symbol with Runewords. So this is actually a reference to the strings.txt. And you can see here we have local language strings UI.json, and we have a key in here Runewords, and that's exactly what we're referencing here. So we're referencing the key in the UI.json. So it's interesting that we can reference text strings like that, and we'll utilize that a bit more later on. So the next important field is this onClick message. And what this does is it tells the panel manager to open the panel called Runewords. And this actually refers to another different file, which we'll look at now in a sec. We then have the text color, which is aqua. And this is actually a callback to one of my earlier videos on item colors in Diablo 2 Resurrected. And that's linked up here. And we then have some other things like the text style, the sound effect, etc. And likewise for our cube recipes, we have much the same here, except our string is no longer referencing something from the UI.json. We now just have a plain string in there saying cube recipes. So realistically, the reason you use those references is so you can actually edit the different translations for the word. So if you're playing in German or Spanish or French, you can have an accurate translation using that reference. Where if we just fill out the string, it'll always read cube recipes no matter what language we're playing in. And again, when we click this, we open the panel manager, open panel, cube recipes. So how do we actually populate these new panels? Well, if you see, we have Runewords and cube recipes. And essentially what we want is Runewords hd.json and cube recipes hd.json. So we're adding hd.json to the end of the name that we're using in the onClick message, and that gets us our new file names. So firstly, we'll have a look at this cube recipes hd.json, and we can see here we have a new settings panel, and its name is cube recipes. And then under that, we have a bunch new children again. Again, we have rectangles for the background. We've this click catcher, and then a few other children such as a text box for the title. And that title again is just cube recipes. Again, not a reference. And we have a different style. We've a style title block. So now's a good time to talk about some of these $ style title block or $ font color aqua that we previously saw. And these are coming from this underscore profile hd.json. So you can see here we've added in a font color aqua, and that's what we're referencing in the other files. And likewise, if we look for this style title block in the profile hd.json, we find it here where it specifies a font color, point size, drop shadow, alignment, spacing, etc. So essentially we're just referencing all these values in the style title block, and that gets used as the style here. Now we could also define these inline by just replacing that with the actual values. So our style could have font color, point size, etc. defined inline, but we'll leave it with the reference for now. And then we have a close button here. So this is the X in the top corner. And we can see we have onClick message, panel manager, close panel, cube recipes. So previously we had open panel, we now have close panel. Nice and straightforward. We then have a background, and then under that we have this recipes. So we have a text box widget, which is named recipes, which just has the text cube recipes go here. And we can see we have the inline style here. So again, I could have used a $ reference to something in this profile hd.json, but instead I defined everything inline. And then finally we have an action button table. Now this is copied verbatim from the settings page, I think. So you can see here we said it has 3 columns, but it doesn't actually, it only has one, which is the close button. Now previously this might have had like an apply, a default and a close button, but we're just using the close button. And realistically I should remove these other columns, and that just shows you what you do here doesn't have to be perfect, but you do have to check in game to see how things look. So there is a lot of back and forth between editing something and then checking it in game. And again, our close button has a file name which it references. It has an on-click message for calling close panel on our cube recipes. It has different text colors. It has a tooltip string which is useful, so when you hover over it, it'll actually show up close. And that's it. That's our new panel which says cube recipes go here. So realistically, if we were filling this in for an actual mod, we'd probably replace this text box widget with a table widget with different rows for the different recipes. So now let's look at our Runewords. And again, we have a settings panel here named Runewords. We have a bunch of different rectangles, etc. Again, we have a text box for the title, but this one references the Runewords that we defined in the UI.json. We have our close button, and then we get down to our tab bar widget. So this is where we had 2 different tabs, a common Runewords and an all Runewords tab. And again, you can tell that I actually nicked this from the options menu since it's still named options tabs, but that's realistically what you're going to do. You're going to be looking at the different menus in the game to figure out what you can and can't achieve. So here we have a bunch of different things. Again, a file name going to stash tabs. We have an active text color, an inactive text color, some offsets, different styles, then our text strings. So these are the names of the different tabs. And you can see we have common Runewords and all Runewords, and then the tab messages. So like our on click message, these are what gets executed when we click the different tabs. So we have our settings panel message, toggle child panel, common Runewords and all Runewords. So again, this is like our cube recipes and Runewords where we add hd.json, and that's our new file name for the new panel. So you can see we have common Runewords and all Runewords, which translates into common Runewords hd.json and all Runewords hd.json. And then we just have our action button table again. This time we only have 1 column with a width of 1500. So previously we had 3 columns, each with a width of 500. So this one's just a single column to show that you could have either those 3 columns or 1 column. It doesn't really matter, and it's something you just need to check in game. So we also, interestingly enough, have an image widget here, which is the background of our panel. And we can see our file name is controller panel options custom panel bg. And as I said, these files are referenced from the data HD global UI directory. So if we check back in our directory structure, we can see we're in data HD global UI, and then we have controller panel options. And you can see here controller panel options, custom panel bg, and we have custom panel bg.sprite. And you can see here I pretty much just took the existing panel options.bg and I added my own watermark into the background. So let's look at our different panels. So we'll go to our common Runewords hd.json first. And again, we have a type settings panel here, and the types of the panels don't matter a huge amount from what I've seen, but they do have to be real types. So there's types, video options, settings panel, etc, etc, all the different widgets, but you couldn't make a new type called, say, custom panel or something. That would not work in the game. I don't have a complete list of the types at the moment, but it should be easy enough to find a type that works just from looking at the different menus. And here we're just using settings panel. In the all Runewords, we use video option panel. Both of them have the exact same result in game. So our common Runewords then has a few children. We have a few different ones here now. We've a scroll controller widget and a scroll view widget. And now this gets us a scrollable panel, which is very useful if we have a long list of things, which we will have with our Runewords. And we could see that in game. I'll show it again at the end of the video. But on our all Runewords tab, we actually could scroll up and down because we had a huge list of Runewords. So again, we have another table widget here, and we have 3 different columns in it. We have a small table column, And this again is a reference back to the profile hd.json, and you can see that I made a custom entry here, small table column, which has a width of 430 and the alignment of the horizontal and vertical is just fit. So that could be fit or center, or there's possibly a few other things like left or right, etc. So we're referencing that column definition here, and then we're just defining two other columns inline. Now I could have defined these back in the profile hd.json and just referenced them here, but I want to show that you can mix references with inline definitions. And again, we have a row height, we have a table row, then we have our headers, and you can see here we're using the style settings title, where below we're using the style settings text. So we have this kind of headers row which has a different style to the actual body of the table. And again, we just have our Runeword name, item type, and rune columns, and we have the text of those, which is just Runeword, item type, runes. And then we have a bunch of different rows, so we have a row for stealth, and then the text is actually referencing the local lang strings item runes.json. So that's where Runeword 133 is defined, and where these or 07L or 05L, etc. strings are actually defined. And you can see here we can even reference them and then have a string literal in the middle and then reference another value after it. And again, we have another just for grief. And likewise for the all Runewords HD, we've pretty much identical settings in here, except we have far more rows in the table. So you can see we have entries for Ancient's Pledge, Black, Fury, Holy Thunder, Honor, etc, etc. So we've a ton of Runewords defined in here. And so that's pretty much it. All we did was add some new rows into this pause layout hd.json and then make new files based on those panel names. And essentially those are just new JSON documents with different widgets, different text, etc. in them. And as always, these files are linked in the description below, so do check them out. They're on my GitHub and you can download them and play around with them yourself. So again, checking it out in game, you can see our Runeword info, you can see our custom background here, our table with our 3 different columns, our 2 different tabs, our title, our X in the corner with a tooltip, our close button down below, again with a tooltip. You can see our font color aqua used here, and you can see our scroll bar in action here. You can see our title as well. The headers are a different style to the actual body of the table. And likewise, our cube recipes has a nice centered piece of text here, which is a larger style. There's an extra large or something style that we used. And again, we can just close and open these and we have our text here. Everything works as expected. So it's nice and simple to actually add your mod info into the game so that players don't have to tab out, try find your wiki or your download page or something else. They can just get all the info that they actually need in game. So that's it for me today, guys. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please do remember to like and subscribe. And if you have any ideas for future videos, leave me a comment down below. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.